You ever notice how everybody's intelligent until real intellect walks in the room? Or how everybody's a critical thinker until it's time to actually think critically? Then you see who's been studying the truth and who's just rehearsing opinions. You see, we live in a time now where intelligence is a trend. People don't study, they just scroll. They don't reflect, they simply react. They can memorize talking points from podcasts, memes, and then call it research. But the minute you ask for a source, logic, or context, they fall apart every single time. And that's because real intellect requires real world experience. How can you understand truth without pressure? How can you know wisdom if you've never been tested? And that's because experience, it humbles you. It teaches you that life don't move by theory, it moves by principle. You see, a man who's been broke, betrayed, or blindsided, but still got up and rebuilt afterwards, he thinks differently. He doesn't get high off of opinions. He's grounded in reality because he's actually lived the consequences of his own choices. You see, the problem today is that people like to confuse access to information with intellect. I mean, just because you can Google something doesn't mean you understand it. Knowledge without experience is like having muscle with no motion. I mean, you might look strong, but you can't lift the damn thing. And then the receipts are everywhere if you want to talk facts. Most people are not critical thinkers, they're confirmation seekers. A 2021 study shows that nearly 70% of social media users share headlines that they never read. Let that sink in. They don't even analyze the information, they just chase validation. And that's why misinformation spreads faster than facts do, because it feels good to the ego. Even the education system doesn't teach thinking, it teaches compliance. In 1903, when John Rockefeller funded the General Education Board, you can look this up, his goal wasn't to create thinkers, it was to create workers. And in his exact words, he said, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." So, most people were trained to repeat what they're told and never to question it. Even history proves that real intellect is always attacked first. Just look at Malcolm X, a man with no college degree who could outthink professors, journalists, and politicians. They called him dangerous because he questioned their narratives. Or, we can go back even further. You can look at Socrates. He was executed for corrupting the youth simply by teaching them to think. Real intellect has always been treated as a rebellion of some sort. That's because experience sharpens intellect like struggle sharpens your character. The man who's been homeless, betrayed, oppressed, but studied and reflected through it, he gains a type of discernment that no textbook can give. He learns how people really move, how systems really work, and how emotions can be used to manipulate you. That's what you call wisdom through warfare. And because of that, look at the culture now. We got people quoting psychology terms like gaslighting, trauma, and narcissist, but never read a fucking psychology book in their life. They just use buzzwords to sound intellectual. That's not critical thinking, that's just emotional vocabulary dressed up as intelligence. I know the difference. Or you can even look at politics. How everybody's woke until the truth offends their favorite party. Then suddenly, logic don't even matter no more. They say, do your research. But what they really mean is, find something that agrees with me. Tell me I'm lying. That's not critical thinking, that's tribal comfort. Hell, you can even look at religion. People can quote scripture, but not the context. They cherry pick scripture to defend their lifestyle instead of transforming themselves through it. That's why when a man who's actually studied, lived it, and applies it daily, soon as he walks in the room, that's when everybody get quiet. Because divine intellect, it cuts right through the hypocrisy without raising its voice. You see, real intellect isn't emotional, it's about strategy. It doesn't debate for attention, it dissects for clarity, like I do on my platform. It's calm under pressure because it's been tested in fire already. And that's why the loudest ones usually know the least. They're trying to hide insecurity by being loud. A man with true intellect doesn't need to dominate a conversation. His presence does that just by being there. He's seen too much, he's learned too much, and he's survived too much to waste his time arguing with the blind. You can tell who's never experienced real struggle also, by the way, because they love to romanticize it. They like to speak on masculinity without having to lead. They talk about discipline without ever being tempted once in their life. And then they can quote God but never had to depend on him. Experience gives intellect its edge. That's why some of the wisest people you'll ever meet never set foot in a university. That's simply because life was their classroom and pain was their professor. You see, in Divine Separation, my platform, intellect isn't about showing off. It's about seeing clearly. It's about separating lies from insight, pride from purpose, and people who are followers from people that are actually thinkers. It's about understanding that most people don't hate intellect. They simply just hate intellect, hate what intellect reveals about them. You see, real intellect forces accountability. It makes people confront their ignorance, their inconsistencies, and their emotional reactions. And that's why real thinkers get labeled as arrogant, cold, or elitist. Because the truth, it doesn't stroke their ego, it simply exposes them. So when you walk in with real intellect, backed by study, struggle, and discernment, you don't just speak different, you move different also. You can see the deception before it even speaks. You can sense the manipulation before it unfolds. And then on top of that, you stop mistaking being loud for knowledge, because it isn't. That's divine intellect. Intellect that comes from God, logic, and application. Not your pride, not your college degrees, not online approval. Because everybody's intelligent until real intellect enters the room. Everybody's a critical thinker until they're faced with actual critical thinking. Let that sink in.